What's up, my audience? How's it going? I can't hide anything from you. Yeah, I smoked a little. It's all good though. Yeah, and decided to shoot a little video. Let's see what we got here today. So, again, the exploration of consciousness, playing the game of life, as always. So, I talked about this between attention and awareness thing, which is basically the foundations of alchemy. And there, of course, are some, uh, I suppose, obstacles that may happen because, in the essence, it's kind of simple, but in the practice, there's sometimes um, some debugging that is necessary, and that would be like the only other question to address, so can like that between attention and awareness focus can be easier. And for that, we kind of need to see how consciousness works, and how it really is working, right? Rather than, because it is kind of seeing from the other side. Uh, if you live your life by default, based on how they teach in the Matrix, you see it backwards. It's not how it is. You think that it's like it's all the material, and that you are in this matter world, and everything is solid, and everything is has you know uh, structure. There's time, there's space, and it's like a basically surviving struggle kind of thing. That's at that level of consciousness. That's how everything seems like. That there's suffering, struggle, and all these other things. Now this is why, like, if anybody comes up and says like, "Yo, it's not necessary. You don't have to do this," and so and say like, "Hey, here's how." Um, few people will be interested in saying like, "What do you mean? Like, there's just a completely different view of life?" Yeah, it's the opposite view. It's not like a changing a little bit. It's a dissolution of all the beliefs that created that view of life, and then emergence of truth. And then it's not a matter of opinion. It's just you see it from the other side, how consciousness is structured, so it's very clear to you. And it's a holographic type of view of reality. I tend to not to experience myself as much as you know me moving in the world, but rather the pixels moving around me, because it's different view. I'm not really moved anywhere, even though I drove with my car to the gym. I just changed the pixels around me. My essence was what it was, and everything around me uh, changed. I used physical, basically, motion to change the environment. So you have that, you know, free will, might, as I call it. It's this use of energy to navigate the physical world only. Now, what most problems may occur in this alchemical thing? First of all, I'm just gonna say something from a different perspective. Everything that is meant to be alchemized is a type of past, because not chronological past, right? Not this physical reality, chronological past. That's just chronological past. You can call it chirological past, but it's an internal type of clock, which has the past, and past is always a distorted version, and then the future, which always has a next version, the upgrade of that version, right? Because the game is, you start with the distortions. So when you have a lot of distortions, they're gonna come like one after another, like quote unquote bad luck, right? Poof, there's something like a negative experience creating hurt, negative experience. So when you have a lot of distortions, you have like this really horrible life experience. But that's how you start. Then little by little, when you learn how to play the game, you begin to, every time you alchemize that particular event that was negative, that stemmed from that distortion, poof, the next one, you immediately connect to the future. When you dissolve the past, you go to the present, the future arises. That's pretty much the right motion of life. Okay? So there's a distortion, produces emotion, because distortion is a feeling. Yeah, good thing that I clarified. You may say, like, what is this distortion thing? Distortion is a feeling. You feel it. Like that's the direct experience that you can have of it. You can draw it on like a little map, say that's your distortion. But it's not, it doesn't speak to you at all. It's how you feel it. And distortion feels something that is not supposed to be there, right? Like you can sit in one place, everything is fine around you, and there could be some sensations like emotions, and then if you go deeper behind those emotions, you'll find that feeling that is like a pressure or pain or nausea or whatever, right? Like one of those feelings. I described this before. But you find that within yourself, and that is related to you creating the reality that you're living. And this is why, like, from that feeling of, let's say, hurt, right? That's where it starts, the feeling of hurt, emotions into thoughts, from thoughts to sensations, which is matter, which is your result, the fruit of life. Now you see that fruit of life, and it creates the feeling of hurt. Why? It's because it came from there. That little hurt, that little distortion inside you produced it all. That was the root to produce the entire experience, from feelings through emotions to thoughts to sensations. It was created like that for you, and you came back into your experience, and now you can see that root cause, and you can now alchemize it. That's what happened. You did not get traumatized, or none of that stuff. The trauma happened because that it already existed, right? The conditioning that is a result of it, the belief system. This is why, like, if there's a distortion, there's that feeling of suffering or whatnot. Boom, emotion, thought, sensation, and that is a manifestation of someone doing something that like is painful to you. Boom, there's the pain again. Now in that moment, you can go to conditioning, which is create a belief system and say, like, well, I'm not gonna want to feel like this ever again, so I gotta do something about the situation. And so then you use your logic and say, like, well, maybe I'm gonna do this about the situation or do that about that situation, but I don't want to face this again. And so you create sort of like a map of your reality of how you're going to navigate in order to avoid that hurt. But that hurt is the only thing that's going to set you free. And the first thing to know is that behind that hurt, it's not hurt. Then you may say, so why does the universe asks me to feel that hurt and give me like that way out of my cycle, this karmic cycle? Well, the truth is that it only appears as hurt, and you can say that that's the trick of the game, and basically created that riddle to be resolved. And yes, it's a high stake game. And so, if you're listening to this video, you're playing high stake games. So the hurt is not something to avoid. It is something to completely experience and to see that it's not a hurt. And that's the lesson to learn. If you run away from it, then it's hurt. If you face it, then you see that, like, oh no, that's some form of peace and bliss. Okay, so that's, now we're describing that little process that's going on, right? And so you may have, and you may have some of these distortions sort of like backed up, right? And so that's why sometimes, like, when you start doing this, they keep on coming. So it's normal to kind of be ready once you start living life in this right direction, to take a year or two to mostly just for the alchemy, and then later it kind of gets steady and you're like more up to date. Now you're at the edge of time, whereas before you had like a lot of backed up baggage that needed to be alchemized. But the fact that you alchemize that baggage with the future that's coming to you now is based on the other feeling, which feels like peaceful, blissful, love, coziness, ecstasy, bliss, whatever. And from there, different types of emotions, joyful emotions stemming from there. These joyful emotions then fold into thoughts, because when you feel a joyful emotion, then it leads to thought, joyful thought. Then from that joyful thought, of course, that's imagination. You created something, and then it comes into the world of sensations. Right? So it's all one process. The alchemy, magic, and might. Alchemy, magic, and might. You keep on doing that, and life keeps getting better and better without end, because you're threading at the edge of infinity. So it can't help but have an experience of life continuing, getting better. It's just metaphysical law. And it doesn't make any kind of logical sense, because you see, like, logic deals with finite things, and so this is why infinity makes no sense to logic, but to logos it makes a perfect sense, of course, because it's like always threading the edge of infinity. So it always appears to getting better and better, and that's the freaky interesting part. Now, people who are have experience with hypnosis, they would say that yeah, of course, we call it trance logic or whatever, right? Or dream logic, where things like that are possible that it's not supposed to be possible, like things getting better and better infinitely, every time better and better, So that would not shock these types of people at all, because they are dealing with that state of trance, which is touching the infinite side, and the temporal and the infinite, and that's the state of trance, really, And in a way, you do end up living life more in a state of trance as you alchemize. It's not a state of trance like it's not a state of trance. Well, see, this is why I have to specify, because you can say the people in the Matrix in a state of trance. Yes, they are in a state of trance. They're like in a hypnotic trance, doing things automatically and programmed, stuff like that. But this trance that I'm talking about is not the same. Even though it might be on the same depth of consciousness, it is the opposite, actually. It's a state of trance that does not make you do dull things. It's a state of trance that makes you do really enjoyable things. It stems from different things. Okay. Um, but it is a state of trance. I was thinking about this very carefully. People were saying like that it's not a state of trance, the 0 point, right? Like just focusing in between the attention and awareness. And finding that peace and quiet, just like almost immediately. And because to do that, I didn't have to go into hypnosis. No one had to induce me into hypnosis, right? So people say it's not a trance. But if you go directly to the 0 point, what you're doing, you actually are connecting to like a very deep state of trance at a part of your mind. You're connecting with the trance like close to delta state, or maybe an epsilon, because those states are now where they're touching the 0 point, right? They're almost like they're very low frequencies. There are no low movements going on there. So you basically are putting your that side of you that regulates trance, which is like the wakefulness and the the depth of the trance state, which we are always in that state, except depends which one, right? Like it has to be there's a depth and a direction, and okay, we don't want to complicate it, okay? But there's this part of you that is yin. There's always this background, and it can have waves also, right? And there's this part of you that is a foreground, which also has waves. It has like its own frequency, right? So there's this void energy that has its own frequency, and then there's this foreground that has its own frequency. This is why you could have, like for example, lucid dreaming. Like if you measure your brain waves, what you'll find is that you have theta states active and gamma states active. More like in the frontal here, there's more gamma, and in the back there's more theta. That's what you would find. And then so which state of consciousness this person is in the awareness, yin, that's theta, and then in attention, that's yang, it's gamma. And that's why there is unique, these states of consciousness are unique. You can be in theta and have no gamma, and so that would be like just sleeping and basically nothing, Then you get in a REM state, the gamma kicks in, and now you're lucid dreaming. Okay, now you're in that state. It's like consciousness is all about the states of consciousness, right? Of course. And we see that there is this the depth of the background, right? And then there's intensity of the foreground. That's pretty much how you would say it, right? So when somebody is asked to look between attention and awareness, what we're doing is we are putting the background at as zero as possible, which is stillness and peace, which is actually this part of you is falling asleep. That's what's happening. That part of you is falling asleep. And when it kind of falls asleep, then there's that peace. Right? And then the foreground becomes much more vivid, much more intense. So basically we're synchronizing our consciousness in this. We're basically resetting it to zero, which is where you always want to stay. And then from there, any kind of motion happens into, we're going to get to this. But what I'm trying to say, that's your default state. Not angst, not uncomfortable. It's this deep peace. And then there's this intense blissful experience, ecstatic experience that's going on. And so you can go there just by focusing, especially when there is something there to focus on, attention, and the background and awareness. And you let it, you slide in that direction basically. And it's the opposite direction of analytical thinking. But when you slide in that direction, opposite direction of analytical thinking, you're just going, there's a part of you that's just falling asleep, and another part of you just becoming super awake. You become super attentive, and your awareness becomes very, very still and steady. Okay, so there you got these two forces that's going on basically. This is what's going on with your consciousness all the time. And whatever your experience is going to be those differences between those two vibrations. What is your background awareness, and what is your foreground intensity and attention. Okay, all the things that you're directly seeing and experience. Right now, if you go to that 0 point between the 0 and 1, whatever, that thing, freedom, I call it freedom because it feels like infinite freedom. It feels right. Okay, now you can go there, like I said, by focusing in between of attention and awareness. It's a type of focus that no one have to induce it in you. You can do it, and that type of focus will automatically resolve any kind of suffering or whatever triggers that may have happened. So it's guaranteed to be the only solution. It's whatever way you get there, it's going to be about zeroed out awareness and intensified attention. That's what's going to happen. And in that state, nothing is missing. Okay? And it's just a state. I'm going to say it. It's just a state. Without making any kind of magical about this, nothing. I'm just saying that it's a state. Even though it is super fucking magical, and then the shit that you can do with it is amazing. Without that, any person can move into that state. I'm almost sure about that. I mean, there might be exceptions as always, but I think any person can move into that state. If anyone who wants it, if you keep their attention long enough on focusing where they need to focus, it takes time sometimes, and it's all right. And it may have all sorts of processes that happen. They may have like emotional process that start happening or whatever. It's normal. When it was happening to me at the beginning, and I was almost like gravitating to that state of like, that 0 point. And so when I was gravitating toward, there was all sorts of obstacles in the way, so to speak. And I had like a lot of different types of emotional experiences that were like a cathartic, if you will. So at the beginning, this is normal. But after some time, it becomes home, and I don't have any more of these. I have like cyclical challenges that happen to me, not because any particular reason. And that's eventually that's where you settle in. It appears to be so, that you settle in with this. Okay, it's all about moving to the 0 point as much as possible, and anything in the way there should be alchemized back to the 0 point. That's the game there. Okay, clear. What else I was gonna say about that? See, don't smoke too much weed, kids. I don't want to end up like Uncle Tootus, huh? Nah, I kid. I have a bit of a brain pause. But I'm gonna catch the train of thought. Okay, as I was saying, damn, I'm tripping balls now. I talked too much about that 0 point and everything kind of zeroed out. Ah, shit. What was I saying, man? Right, right. Okay, okay. So alchemizing anything in the way of it. Um. Okay, so that appears to be the first game, and you play this game, and like I said, I'm admitting, because there's sort of like different schools of thought, and one school of thought says um, that uh, they just one school of thought is just like completely in one side, which says that it takes years but I think nobody really believes that anymore. That it takes years of practice before you get quote unquote enlightened. That's this idea, right? And there's another side of it says that no, you do it instantaneously. You do it instantaneously or not at all, and that everything else just basically don't matter. And reality is that yes, you can access it and focus there instantaneously, and to see like, oh my god, there's no problems, there's no like, what the fuck was it? That was just a process of the mind. Now that there's no process of the mind, fuck, there's no problems, you know. um and you see that there's no problems, not only that there's no problems because your mind was making problems, but you also see that being in that state there's no problems because that state takes care of everything. But I also have to say something, that what I'm observing, what I observe in myself and other people, and sometimes when people are led to the 0 point and they see that, oh, there's peace and quiet, everything's great. Sometimes there's, after that reset, sometimes mind wants to go back into the matrix, right? So there might be another reset kind of necessary. Um, but then as they keep on training their awareness to go back there, to go back there, to go back there, all sorts of emotional things may start happening, and I see that happening. Um, so it seems that it depends on the person, and it might be to do with like how much there is to process, because when you touch the 0 point, then everything else is kind of contrasting against it, and so it kind of, you can keep on alchemizing, and sometimes all that stuff starts coming through until you alchemize. And so even though you go to the 0 point instantaneously by moving your focus between attention and awareness, what follows, or the consequences of that, can be challenging. Now, technically, if somebody would not have that baggage past built up, that would not happen. So it's very likely why some people go through like really heavy stuff, because they have like heavy karma, if you want to call it that way. And then the people who may not have that much. That's why for some that transition to 0 point is hell, and for others not that much. I think it's just because of like what kind of game we're playing, what kind of, you see what I'm saying? Because we're all playing different types of games, and I think that if you have a lot to process, that is not bad news. That means that you probably asked to play a deeper level of game. This is my theory, that like we all kind of select where we're gonna max out, and so we play that level of game, and the level of game is directly proportionate to the amount of pain that you're gonna have to go through the game, or suffering. No, not suffering, because suffering is not necessary. um, Distortion, right? The negative feeling, distortion, I call it distortion. How much distortion you're gonna have to go through. I think that we select that, and some of us go say fuck it all the way, and some of us select no, I'm just gonna go this way, this way, this way, and so that is just my theory, because you know that's what I'm observing, and for it to be kind of confirmed that that is the case, more observations would be necessary. But besides the point, this was really going on. So, but the moral of the story is 0 point is your focus at any point in time. You want to start living at that 0 point, basically, right? Now, what happens when you stay at that 0 point? Your mind doesn't just stay there all the time. The mind activities may start happening from that. So now from that 0 point, from that freedom, the emotion may happen. That emotion may bring a thought or image in your mind, right? That thing starts bubbling up. The process of this creation still happening. Okay? And so during that time, you do go to the trance state. And so you do end up in the trance state that may be akin to being high, or tripping balls. But in a positive way, like just having a really good fucking time for no reason at all, just because it's awesome, or for whatever, mind always finds a reason for whatever the small reason. The stupidest reason to be happy, the better. So you are in that trance. You do feel it a bit like drugged up, and this is what I'm experiencing, and I'm seeing this what other people are experiencing. But now, not because you drugging yourself up, it's just starts popping up. So, not in a direct way, you do end up spending a lot of more time in the trance state. Okay. And in fact, living in that trance state, it is like part of your essence is connected to the 0 point, and another, obviously, that background being still, then starts vibrating a little bit. You go into theta now, right? And then whatever emotions you're feeling, that's your foreground energy, and whatever emotions because that foreground energy is the same thing, and it falls into emotion, and then it falls into like a thought, right? That could become an image, because we also have to say, like, what is thought? Thought is a type of imagery. It's a movie creation, and it can be like creative or destructive. So that's thought, because word is not a thought. Word may not lead to thought, and it may lead to thought, but word is not a thought. Thought that is kind of its own thing. And so in that trance state, some thoughts feel really good. And so there's this exploration of these thoughts that feel really good in that state. And that leads to the sensations and eventually comes into the matrix. No, I shouldn't say matrix, but in 3D experience, that's different. Okay, so there's display of the background, which is like the depth of your trance state, and then the intensity of your foreground, which is your emotions, thoughts, and sensations. Okay. And that's what's going on. And if you move in a certain state of trance and become aware and attentive or certain types of thoughts, you will experience a certain type of feelings. It's just the way it is. Okay. But because the base feeling is peace and bliss, the emotion was, let's say, joy, and the image was also joyful, and then it comes into your sensory experience as well. um, what else I can say about that? That's just like the nature of consciousness. And so, yeah, again, this process, you can call it magic. Magic is about having the base feeling moving into emotion, having that emotion to have an image, and then just enjoying that for the sake of enjoyment, and then it comes in some form in a world of sensations, which is matter. Okay, so that's what's going on. So this is why I don't say that once you go to the 0 point, it's all done. No, once you go to the 0 point, you may or may not have to have alchemized a lot. Okay, and whatever you have to alchemize, you're just gonna have to, because anything that's gonna put you out of that 0 point, that's your throne. Anything that's gonna take you out of your throne, you have to alchemize it, go back in it. That has to be the base of your experience. There's a part of you that always have to be kind of close to zero or zeroed out, and another part of you that always has a certain level of intensity and attention. Right? That's supposed to be your base line. And then you have the feelings, emotions, and thoughts. And to differentiate the feelings from emotions and sensations, this is why it's very important. They're very, very different. So we have these emotion. For example, the fear would be emotion, and then once the fear goes away, it goes into the feeling of, let's say, pain. That's a feeling. The feeling and emotion, and that fear, that emotion, then falls into an image. That's what it does. Falls into an image, and then it comes into your reality as like that negative experience. Okay, everything just works like that. So as you can see, the feeling, emotion, thought, sensation, and it works in one way and another way. Okay, and so then that process from the feeling, emotions, thought, sensation, and then going back again, that is like one bubble of experience, like one memory, right? That's what it is. It's just like one bubble of your experience. And as you alchemize the one that was kind of messed up, you automatically gonna have to create something that is much more cool, much more awesome. Yeah. Okay. What else can I say about that? Yeah, I think that's it. I just wanted to say that there, upon realization of that 0 point, you may need to keep on pointing back there for quite some time, alchemizing a lot of things. Okay, that's just the reality. Which is great news, because at the same time as you're alchemizing these old memories that were putting you in a cycle, in a loop, now there's a new realities coming into your experience as you alchemize. But I say that it's not just alchemy. That's why I always say alchemy, magic, and might, because it's not just alchemy. Some people, this is where they stop. They just alchemize and that's it. And they say that's it. You don't need to do anything else, because everything else is kind of automatic. And no, it's not really automatic. like you can clearly play an instrument. You like, for example, you can stay close to that 0 point, right, and not leave that sort of 0 point, and not actually have intention. For example, you want to feel a certain type of feeling in your body. You want to focus there, right? If you live without intention, you're not going to focus there. It's like, why? It's perfect as it is. Like that 0 point is perfect. But this is like where the old people live. If if you're if you're not old people and you just don't want to fucking retire and just be like, in bliss and peace all the time, you have intention. And so some may say like, oh no, fuck the intention, because as soon as you start with the intention, you're going to keep on intending. True. But you do it because it's fun, and it requires another level of skills to be learned. So then you become magician also. And you say like, no, I want to play with that. I say, I want to evoke any kind of feeling that I want. Right? If I want to focus on this feeling, I can focus on this feeling. If I can focus on that, I can focus on that. And decide based on what your intent in the moment is, what kind of diapason, I suppose, you want to experience. That's your intent. Okay? And so the intent obviously goes into the feeling that you want, because that's at the root. Then that feeling may create all sorts of emotions, which is again like, you can have like an ecstatic feeling, but then you could start giggling and laughing. So there's this emotion of joy coming from the feeling of ecstasy. And so feelings and emotions are different. So yeah, so you play with the feelings, and you go into any state that you desire to be fit for the situation. And that's essentially the magic. But after that, the magic goes in a little bit to more complex things, and you may want to, you intend something, you feel it, and then the image comes along, and you experience it with an image. Okay? And so that you create just like one bubble of experience. And so that's magic. That's it. Like, that's where the magic ends, really. It's so simple. And I would also say that instead of imposing like the image from the outside, you could see what kind of image is going to be generated from the inside. Meaning, what kind of emotion stems from what kind of emotion stems from that feeling? Poof, let's say joy. Okay, what kind of picture stems from that joy? Oh, that. Okay. And then, of course, once it's experienced, it's done, it's going to come into your sensory world. It's on the pipeline. Okay. So, and that's how you do magic. It's more from the inside out than from the outside in. Even though having an image sometimes from the outside in, you can have an image, and that image can evoke the feeling too. That's fine also, right? The image can evoke the feeling too. It's fine. But really, like, the original structure is the feeling creates the image, and then later, once you have the image, referring to that image, you can go back to the feeling. And that's just basically like pretty much I described the essence of how trance states work. Okay? Now, right. And then some people may stop here and say, okay, that's it, because now I don't have to do anything. Everything's just going to come into my experience. And they are right. Most of the things would come into the experience, but they have another level of degree of freedom, which I call might. again, you say like, well, when you're gonna start, when you go in there and start uh, micromanaging and building systems and participating in that physical world, it's just not gonna stop. Yes, true, but that is another level of uh, you know of the game. You don't have to do this, but if you do it, you participate way more in it. See, this is why, like, from this elderly person that always stays in it keeps the frequency, to a really young and explorative soul that engages in the magic and engages in the might as well. Okay, and I'm just saying that, even though it's true, yes, if you sit in that bliss state, everything's okay, everything's going to come to you eventually, but you're not going to be like have an experience of participating in the process of magic, which could be super fun. And the same thing with the mind. Like, you may not have the experience participating in the physical hand to hand, stuff, putting things together as well. Yes, universe probably would bring people to do that for you, but you're not going to be living through the alchemy, magic, and might, and that is the fullest way to live. That's why, from the intent and allowance, when we talked about the magic world, the physical world is about the action, which is like a directed action. You have a goal, a purpose, tasks, and then you go through these actions to accomplish the task. And you, again, over there is balance as well. You can't keep pushing too much action, because then you're running the red, and then you can't be not enough action because you're kind of in the cold. So you find the balance on the action world as well. Okay, and that's the way I see how to live life to the fullest. I know some people may say like, oh, I'm so fucking tired of this, of the challenges, I just want to be in that 0 point for a fucking year or two. Yeah, fine, do it. So, like, if I don't have to worry about anything else, and if you say telling me that, like, being that 0 point, the shit's gonna work out in my life and settle in, and I could just be, doing my alchemy and chilling for a couple of years, yeah, yeah, totally legit. But like I say, that's not the end of the game. Um, there's much more. And it also, I have to say, that it appears to me that um, this redevelopment of consciousness that's taking place, it appears to me sort of revolving around building the functional model of the reality as well. At least that's the way I see it. And the functional model of the reality, meaning that it's not just the model. It's not just idea that you read and you said like, oh, that's pretty cool. Oh, that's how consciousness works. That's pretty awesome. No, you are navigating it as well. You're not just reading it at the theta delta states of consciousness or whatever. You're going there on a moment's notice, as it's necessary, and that is your control of consciousness. And you can move from one state to another, and that is the development of that functional model. I When I was reading some information about like the Vedic traditions and others, they were talking about like this mount, meaning like, oh, that god is flying like this, griffin looking being, and this riding an eagle, this riding like all sorts of mounts. I was like, why the fuck these gods need mounts? Like, what is this? What's up with the mount? And the way I see it now, that is very likely that these mounts were sometimes called like chariots of the gods, or whatever you want to call it. But like, if you're in a space and a spaceship is your navigation equipment to navigate space, universe, then your own internal spaceship, if you will, that is to navigate consciousness. And it looks to me that everything is built around building that consciousness navigation apparatus within yourself. That's where the tech is. It's in your mind. You're building it. You can also say that you're building your Iron Man suit, if you will. That's the metaphor in that movie, actually, and so in many other movies. Okay, so that makes sense to me now. What they're talking about that, the spaceship, the armor, the vehicle for, and you can call it like an avatar maybe. That's another word for it. And so building an avatar, that would be probably the most sane thing to say. You are building an avatar that is functional. If you say if you have intention to do a specific task, imagine a specific thing, go to a specific state, access specific feeling, then you need that apparatus. That just becomes something that is actual only after you live in a 0 point and then see what else is going on with this game of life. Some people never engage in it, and some people do, and some people engage a little bit, and some people engage a lot. But that's what I have to say. I think that's it for today. What else I have to say? Damn, 51 minutes. Long time. So that's just a little model of consciousness. I just wanted to reiterate that there are layers about the feeling, emotion, thought, and sensation. And because I've looked at the literature, and there's just no literature that actually shows how everything really works. And all the psychological books are basically going in a kind of wrong direction, and these models look funky and don't make no sense. So, and one of the things I have to say about the opposite of alchemy is psychology, and obviously you see where that ends. It creates the belief systems. This is why you don't go that way, because when the event happens, you don't go into the direction of analysis, right? What you do is you got to find the root cause, that feeling that caused everything, and alchemize that. That's the only way. And the opposite direction, because naturally what your mind was going to say, like, oh, let's analyze this shit, like, oh, it's my childhood, blah, blah, and you create more and more and more. No, you don't need to go there. That story was created from that distortion that you asked to play, and that's it. It's nobody's fault, and you already know the story. You don't have to look at it again. You don't have to analyze it. But even though your mind may say, like, oh, it's about that, no, shut the fuck up. It doesn't matter what it's about, right? We already know what it's about. Let's go where the feeling is. But the mind sometimes is trying to pull you back, and because it doesn't want to die, because that thought does not want to die, because it's programmed to survive. And you say, don't worry about it. We're going to, dissolve you and change you in much better thought. And so that's why it has to trust. Boom, boom, boom. Done. But you don't go that direction of analysis. This is why if you live life like that in this direction, there is no talk about traumas. There is no talk about childhood wounds, sort of like in the childs and all of that stuff. It's all mumbo jumbo, gibberish, confusing nonsense. I don't deny the story. The story is real, but there's no answer in the story. By looking at the story over and over again, you're just propagating it, because you're missing the point of it. You're leaving that thing, that distortion that must be, which is the root cause of everything. And you're distracting yourself while you're supposed to be focusing on that. You're distracting yourself with analysis. And so you miss the point of alchemy. And so the next cycle is going to be exact same experience for you. You see? And so unfortunately psychology created this self-help tool that it basically helps the thought to survive when it's supposed to be recycled and die. And so it becomes more difficult to live life and lots of unnecessary suffering. All right, guys, that's enough for today. I'll speak to you in the next one, and happy zeroing out and living large. So that's what's up. Peace. See you in the next one.